All right, welcome to the podcast, everyone. My name is Patrick. I'm the founder and the CEO of Pod. Today, super excited about the guest we have on board, Randi Deckard. Randy, for folks who don't know you that much, I'm going to give folks a bit of an overview on your career. You've spent your career in the world of sales, most specifically in the world of healthcare. Started as a lab supervisor, making your way all the way up to being today an SVP of growth at Bestler, selling into hospitals. Uh, I have to say, I love folks who start at the ground level, so to speak, and then grow
Mhm.
into selling into that industry or that space or that function. We have one of our client who is now selling a software for training for frontline workers in restaurant and spent her career as kind of a restaurant manager. And I think that gives sellers so much more empathy and perspective on who they're selling into. So, anyways, I wanted to point that out because when I was kind of doing research ahead of our discussion, I realized that and I thought it was super, super cool. But, anyways, beyond your work as a revenue leader, I know that you get engaged with different associations, different communities. You were a founding member of Wednesday Women. You were a chapter leader with Pavilion. You're an advisor for the Heart Foundation, Heart Health Community. Sorry.
Mhm.
Anything I'm missing about your brilliant career so far?
I am in a few other communities,
Okay,
women in sales, women in
nice,
revenue, just,
nice.
women, supporting, other women, in, go to market.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on. Super excited about our conversation today. And I think it's a topic I think people will like because it's very pragmatic and very practical. We're going to talk about AI. Obviously, there's been a lot of, it's kind of been an omnipresent topic in, I would say, the world in the past 2, 3 years, but in sales, talking to a lot of revenue leaders, a lot of them know about it, want to apply it, not necessarily sure where to start. So today we're going to talk about your journey with it. We're going to talk about the impact it's had on you, on your team, on how you think about growing and operating a revenue organization. So super excited about diving into more of a less theoretical and aspirational version of AI, but a very practical one, which I think is very important. Cool?
Let's go. Yeah, let's do it.
Hell yeah. So before diving in, first questions is tell us about, and we ask that to all our guests, uh, what got you started into sales? How did you stumble into sales in the first place?
So I resisted. Has anyone else out there resisted the call to sales? Like, as you shared in the beginning, I was started out in clinical research scientist, and actually thought I wanted to be a forensic pathologist.
There.
Yes, I have 100 autopsies under my belt. Great dinner conversation if we ever want to talk about peeling someone's face off. You can edit that part out if that's too much.
No, it's great. I love that.
But it was actually my pathology mentor as well as my husband who said to me, do you really think about this forensic pathology track? You have a lot of personality. You're really good explaining, complex things and making people understand. You'd be really good in sales or the commercial side of healthcare. And
Mm,
that that seed was planted, and I had a friend take me out to lunch and say, "Hey, I know you're on this track, but there's a startup selling to pathologists. Would you be open? Would you walk
mm.
through that door and have a conversation with the VP?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll have a conversation." Well, the rest is history.
That's
So,
right.
that was just such an amazing opportunity. And when I talk to people, no matter what their journey is or what they're considering or transitioning, I always say, has a door been open and you walk past it or didn't even poke your head in? So you got to be open to the
Yeah.
conversation, right? And because I had those seeds planted, I was willing to have a conversation, and that was probably the most amazing role for me because, of course, I knew pathologists.
Yeah.
I knew the what they had to do in their day to day. I knew how to talk to them. I knew how to approach them. And I mean, I knew nothing about sales when I took this
Yeah.
role, right? And they said, "Hey, can you sell precision medicine, and can you sell, if you could do 1 million, but if you could do two your first year, that would be
That
great.
would be great.
And I'm like, okay. And that was literally what was handed to me. Like, that was like, there was like, it was a startup. There was no
Yeah.
playbook. There was no nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So I just started having conversations, and, you know, I learned very quickly, how can you scale yourself? Well, I brought pathologists together, and I'm happy to say, that first year I sold 5 million.
Oh
So
yeah. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
And it was also like a very, to your point earlier, a very natural progression from
Yes.
your actual
Yeah.
subject matter
And,
expertise to then.
right. Yeah. So like yes, I had to learn like the precision medicine, like what I was selling, but I knew how to talk to pathologists. And
Yeah.
I knew, like I said, I knew that as an ICP, I was going to be that ICP, right?
Yeah.
Like I got what I got what they, and how they talked. I think it's
Yeah.
another thing is like, no matter what industry you're in, there's so much jargon, right? Like we'll
Yeah.
just use go to market, GTM, PEG, like there's just so many
Mhm.
terms. When you get in healthcare, there's even more terms.
Yeah.
And I never assumed, right? So whenever I could, I just used plain language and kept it simple and just
Mhm.
approached everything as a conversation. And, um, Andy Paul, I found out about
Mhm.
him like a few years ago, Sell Without Selling. And when I read
Yeah.
that book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. I just approached it like, hey, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, not everyone was ready to utilize that service, but I followed back as I got more social proof. And then that just kind of like, as you get momentum, and it's easy once you get momentum to keep going, right?
You have tailwinds, and then things seem a bit more easy. And I
Yeah.
think what something that's interesting about the lingo as well is, going back to my earlier point of, I think it brings so much empathy and perspective on the product or the service that you're selling, is when you're in B2B SaaS, as an example, you have a lot of reps that end up jumping from one industry to another, to selling into one function and another.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the heavy lifting that organization are doing from a sales enablement perspective is, hey, let's teach them about this space or this person or this ICP or what matters to them. And kind of someone that doesn't know how to sell but understands that from the get-go, I think is way better tool and equipped to be able to have productive conversation and be a counselor and understand the challenge and the pain point.
Yeah.
That's half of the sell in and of
Yeah.
itself. So that's
and
pretty
it
awesome.
really was like a solution,
Yeah.
sell. And of course it was something new to the industry at the time, like it wasn't broadly adopted. So not only was this a startup, but like what we were actually selling back in the day, I mean, it's commonplace now, common practice, but precision medicine was considered trial. Like
Yeah.
not all payers, like whether it was a United Healthcare or whatever, was even paying for that. So
Yeah.
it was very cutting edge innovation. That was exciting.
Yeah.
And I will say, one of the things that served me, and I didn't even realize that it wasn't like a common trait for sellers, is coming from that clinical science world and just being in the medicine healthcare practice, being a documentarian. I have had it
Mm.
ingrained to me in my training to document everything, create SOPs. I know we're not supposed to use jargon, but
No,
standard operating procedure, also
yeah.
known as a process, right?
Yeah.
And so I documented everything that I did, what worked, what didn't work, what I, went back to and refined, and then what happened. And so after that first year, they said, hey, if you can do this on your own, could you like maybe teach some other people like
Get
what
a
you did,
few folks
how
to do
you
the
did it?
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, sure. And I had a team. I ended up with a team of 15 people, and I was able to do that quickly because I had documented everything.
Mm.
And once again, my skill set as a clinical scientist is, when you're designing an experiment, it's a framework, right? And there's
Yeah.
a lot of different things that can change. So I was able to bring these people on and give them guardrails, but still let them be their own, because not everyone's going to talk like Randy does to a
Yeah.
pathologist, right?
And
um
I think what's kind of interesting is you see a bit of that I don't know, that passion in sales for the very passionate ones, you can hear it when they talk about their process. And
Yeah,
I mean, when you geek out about the process and the standard operating procedures, etc., I think this is where you see someone that really found their niche, or a space they could really expand both their interpersonal and then very structured oriented part of their personality.
yeah,
That's quite awesome. Maybe as a question, like this is how you started. You've obviously went from being an IC to then managing a team.
yeah.
Today, a few years later, I guess, what keeps you going? Is there one or two things that you're like particularly passionate about today as you think about the next 10 or 20 years ahead of you?
Right. So, my true north is people, and that may
Mhm.
sound hokey to some of our listeners, but I got into healthcare to help people, right? I
Yeah.
That's why I went on that journey. And what I realized is as I got a team and became a leader, I could create other leaders,
Mhm.
have an impact on people. And over the course of my career, I've said yes to a lot of things where my peers are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "This is how you learn, is you step out of
Yeah.
your comfort zone, right? That's where you grow." But like I said, going back to having that legacy and impact on others and giving other people, opportunities, because I came from a diverse background, obviously coming into sales, but
Yeah.
I myself have hired people who weren't like traditional sales. I've hired a project manager, and I know the money that she earned in sales was life changing because she told me, like what she went on to do because she had never earned that much money before. And she
Yeah.
didn't even think it was possible. Because, of course, as a project manager, you're not getting bonuses, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
because of quota.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really, that's the thing that drives me as a leader is creating other leaders and giving
Mhm.
other people opportunities and believing in them, even though they may not have everything that, oh, so you haven't sold services or you haven't sold SaaS before.
Yeah.
Okay. But what did you do before, and how could you transition to this role? And what are some of the skills that you already have that would do well? And I think about like over COVID, how, I heard a lot of bartenders coming into sales. Well, it makes
Mhm.
sense. What do they do
Yeah.
all day? They have a conversation, right? Or even
Same
a
core
hairdresser,
skills. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or a teacher. Teachers as educators are great, especially if it's a
Yeah.
complex where
Yeah.
they need to walk and guide a buyer through something that's complex. That education component is super
Yeah.
important. So that's what really excites me is like, how can I continue to grow people and give people an opportunity, because I feel that's the way that I'm paying it forward. Like, yes, I had to be open at first, but
Yeah.
someone gave me a shot, right? Like, I knew
Yeah.
nothing about sales. And here I am now leading a team, sales, marketing, customer success, right?
Yeah, and like someone gave you a shot at first, but
Yeah,
also these folks or these leaders have helped you to grow into what you are today. Like
yep,
trusting you with managing a team and growing a team and owning a department, etc. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because initially when you first said it's just about helping people, I was like, oh, it kind of makes sense. You're in a healthcare space, but there's the helping people within your team as well that is seems to be at the center of what your
yeah.
kind of your axis. So that's quite awesome. Um, let's dive in. I know we want to talk about AI.
Hmm.
We've had a few conversations, obviously, before where you told me about your AI journey
Yeah,
across your organization, from what you've learned, how it impacted you, to how it's changed the way that you think about, I think, your team and the tools that you use. Maybe for folks out there, tell us maybe at a high level what was your journey into transforming your organization with AI? Where did it start? What kind of initially prompted you into maybe taking a closer look at it, and then we'll dive into the how and the what.
yeah. So personally, like, I just started becoming AI literate about
Mm-hmm.
3.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate because of the executive community pavilion. I met
Yeah.
some like-minded people who were, also on the journey at the same time, and was able to bounce ideas off of well, how might this be used across go-to-market? And when I say go-to-market, I'm talking sales, marketing, customer success, the whole journey. And, you know, the first thing I did is just look at my whole system, how everything's connected, and what are the things that we're doing that are admin that is taking away from peopling. You'll hear me talk
Mm,
about people a lot,
people.
right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, the easiest thing to do is reduce admin. We all know, like, there's stats for sellers,
Yeah.
how much time they spend on admin, and depending on the report, it's anywhere from 68 to 75% of the time,
Yeah.
if they don't have tools, whether that's tech or AI, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, what do we want our sellers doing? We want them in front of, potential customers, right? More. Where do I want my customer success people? I want them talking to customers, supporting their customers, asking, how, we can support, etc. And what do you want marketing doing? You want marketing, being front of, our existing as well as prospective customers. So it's all about
Yeah.
peopling. And I found several opportunities where there was no risk. So this is the thing I think some people get wrong, is that, when I test them, like, what can we do first that it's going to present no risk. It's not going to hurt our
Mm,
brand, and it's not going to cause friction for anyone. And that's like internally or externally. And it still seems seamless. So first thing
yeah.
we did was just look at content. And in
Mm,
healthcare, oh my gosh, we have regulatory reports
yeah.
that come out annually that are like 2,000 pages. I don't know about you, but that's a lot.
Yeah. Too
Those
much.
reports before AI, those
Yeah.
reports would take a highly paid, subject matter expert anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to really digest and create a client facing report
Mm,
of like how it might impact them.
yeah.
Well, we can do that in less than a day now. And when I say less than a day, I'm talking like hours, right? We
Yeah.
have refined our prompt of what we want it to look at, how we want it to look at it, and the outputs that we want, right? And
Mm,
we have tested that exhaustively, but to go from 6 to 8 weeks to less than a day where we can turn that around and have something client facing is huge, right?
huge advantage.
just
Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
that alone was huge. And then we're like, okay, now we have this one client facing piece that's valuable. What do we do whenever we create content? Well, how can we slice and dice it and repurpose it, right?
Mm,
So maybe smaller papers, etc. And then it was like, adding stuff into our newsletter blog, adding stuff for campaigns. And that's just kind of how we started. We just kept layering, but always, we're very cognizant of friction and no
mm.
harm to anyone.
Yeah. Kind of baby steps, right? Risk
Yes.
free. If it
Yes.
doesn't work, then it's all good. We'll go
Right.
back to
And
previous
and and
processes. Yeah.
I I've heard from, other leaders, oh, you need to look at your whole system. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have all these little points. And I kind of disagree.
Mm,
You're aware, over the last few years, I have over 200 custom GPTs,
yeah.
and not all of those custom
Maybe,
GPTs are
yeah.
for the business, but but a lot of those custom GPTs, at least 150, are for the business.
Yeah.
And when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, you're crazy, why do you have so many?
Yeah.
And this is where I think people get tripped up with AI. If I'm bringing on someone new and you have, your process that you show them, almost invariably, once, whether they listen to a video, read something, or you tell them how to do something, what happens? They do that thing themselves,
Yeah.
and you look at the output or what they did, and there's usually feedback that first time, right?
Yeah.
So what I have learned, or my experience, is the more custom or the more specific a
Mm,
GPT is, the more successful we are.
yeah.
So
Because it's all
for our,
about the context we give it, right? So the
yes,
broader the
100%,
context,
100%. Yep.
the
Yeah.
more unreliable the output is going to be, I guess.
Right. And so some of those GPTs are literally, if I can use the word, cloned and
Mm,
then refined for something else. So it was similar, but not exactly. So we had a
mm,
foundation and we tweaked it. And that's why we have so many. And then we just were like, okay, we're a private company. I have a P&L. One of the ways we can be profitable is be more efficient. And
definitely.
so I looked at, automation, and between Zapier and Make, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. I started out with
Yeah.
templates and just created some sequences that made it easier for us, like competitive
Yeah.
intelligence. Why are we doing this manually when all this information between what's on the web, what's in our CRM, like that can
Mm,
be all automated and literally spoon fed to us, like if there's a change, right?
yeah.
Like that's not
Yeah.
something, it's not a good use of my time when we can automate that, right?
Randy, what do
So
you see? I really like the focus on automation and efficiency.
sure.
I think what what bears the question for me to ask that, like, okay, if you, all these little tasks that are not worth your time, which I agree with, where are you spending most of your time then? Right? Is it to review the output of these agents, to kind of process it, to make sense out of it, to make decision out of it? Is it,
Right.
you mentioned earlier, like peopling? Is it just like I just want to spend as much time with peopling and I let the agents and the GPTs do the work on the side? Like, how has it transformed the way that you and I guess your team spends their time?
Sure. So as a leader, I get to spend more time being thoughtful about strategy. I get to spend more time about being thoughtful on coaching, mentoring, and then I get
Mm,
to spend more time with our customers.
yeah.
As an executive, I talk to a lot of executives who don't spend time with customers. I spend time with customers every week,
Nice.
whether that's, in person, like joining a call, or just reaching out to customers. That is part of my weekly. I could not do that if I didn't have all this stuff running in the background. So, as an
Yeah.
example, when it's time for me to meet with one of my employees for a one-on-one,
Mm,
the day before, because of the automation that I have set up, um, I'm getting, and so is the employee. This is what we're going to talk about because this is what I'm seeing based what's on the CRM, what's from calls, what's from emails, and so it's customized for them. But we're both getting that a day ahead, and then there's always like I leave ad hoc time in a one-on-one, anything they want to bring up, but
yeah.
we both go in prepared. We know what we need to address,
Yeah.
and like I said, it just allows me to be present
Create
with
space
the
for you. Yeah.
person that I'm with.
I mean,
And
in many pipeline reviews or one-on-ones, oftentimes it's spending way too much time either looking at the data or
yeah,
the fishing for information, and you actually lose time from actually doing
yeah,
coaching or like listening to the other person
yeah,
or thinking strategically about what they can do better. And I think that's super valuable. That's something that we're to some extent with Pod we're trying to solve with like pipeline reviews and deal reviews, but
mhm,
I think it's applicable overall. If you don't have the information, there's no transparency, then you
yeah,
kind of go in on both sides, both the rep and yourself as a leader, kind of go into the blind. And then you have 30, 45 minutes that you basically spend sniffing around or asking questions or poking around and not actually helping each other
right.
in any way.
And
Yeah.
and from the insights just from the insights for strategy perspective, having things, it's looking at all of our data. It's also
Mhm.
looking at the industry reports and different things, but
Yeah.
like having a framework that is automated, so it's fed to me and then I can use that as a
Yeah.
foundation. I still have to use my brain, but I'm
Yeah.
not doing all the manual research to do
Yeah.
that, right? And it's like I said, I'm just more effective because I have more time to people. And I know that
Mhm.
sounds so generic, but it is very effective, because
But I think
I'm using data, right,
yeah.
to people more, but it's huge. And then for my team, we've for the customer success team, they can be more thoughtful in prepping for their QBRs, because
Yeah.
some of the work is automated now. So, once again, they can just be more thoughtful, intentional, and then also, once again, just be more present, because they know, everything from the call is being recorded, the transcript will create a meeting template that they can review before they send it to a customer. So if there's anything that they want to change, that's going to go into the CRM for them. And so once again, they can focus on the things that I hired them for, their critical thinking and how they deal with customers. And then for sales, it just allows them to do actually more of the things that are important. We haven't automated our outbound, but there's research that, goes behind the scenes that they
Yeah.
can utilize. So once again, they can customize their targeted, outbound,
Messages.
for,
Yeah.
yeah. So it just allows them to do more of that, right?
Yeah. There's like
Without,
for me there's always kind of two tiers of value that you can get out of AI, and it's very generic, but I think it speaks to and the steps you've taken as well, from not using it at all to now the impact it has. The first one is, to your point, efficiency. It helps me to
Mhm.
save time, and saving time I think is valuable, but at times it's more of a quality of life improvement than a step function improvement in your performance. And I think
Right.
that's step number one. It's easy, it's tangible, it's in
Mhm.
front of you. Oh, I won't have to spend 7 days to review this report. It'll take me a day. Like, that's
Mhm.
just very tangible value. But I think, like, exactly like you mentioned, I really resonate with it. But the next level of value that is unlocked is around the effectiveness. A lot more fluffy, less tangible, but I
Mhm.
think ultimately a lot more valuable in terms of helping you to sell better or be a better leader. And you can
Right.
make smarter, more informed decision. You can, build more intentionally these relationship with prospects. You can better understand them. Like, all that is less tangible. It's a bit more in
Mhm.
the ether, but ultimately delivers so much more value
Yeah.
for to your reps or to you as a leader. So I think that those are the two levels, and I think a lot of organizations are still at level one, which
Yeah.
is, hey, we just want to automate this, or we want to replace this, or we want to cut down our team, or A, B, C, D. And I think that's all good, but ultimately, what's going to help you to kind of grow your revenue by 3x between now and same time next year? Automation in and of itself can help you to get there part of the way, but that second level I've seen in an organization is what makes the biggest difference. So it's pretty
No,
awesome that you've experienced both of these levels.
yeah, and like I said, there's a maturity, right, as an
Yeah.
organization moves. And I think that, having a leader who's
Mm.
illiterate in AI, and also
Yeah.
encourages. And I've seen, just as being a Perplexity Business Fellow, this year,
Mm.
where I got some of the behind the scenes, um, view to what
Mm.
Perplexity was doing on the roadmap. Hey, what's coming next? Or seeing another industry leader, this is how I'm using it, and having those
Mm.
conversations, and then bringing it back to the team. Hey, this is how I saw someone else use it. This is how, we could use it based on, what we do, and giving people permission
Mm.
to experiment themselves, right?
Yeah.
I think is key. And I was recently at Momentum AI in San Jose,
Mm.
and I was talking to a small group, and we were talking about kind of like having hackathons where, hey, we have a tool, and here's some use cases, but then actually having people, you know, sh- share ideas of how they might use it, like to spark. And I
Mm.
think that's something that, is missing in some organizations as well. You have to give people permission to
To be
experiment. And
creative.
I
Yeah.
don't have all the I don't have all the ideas.
Yeah.
Heck no, right? Some of my staff who are closer to certain things see things a different way. And so I think that
Yeah.
is one thing, is, like I said, making sure that you get everyone's, input. But once again, they have to have permission, and they have to be shown, what's possible to begin with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that where there's a lot of magic that can happen is when you get to the people that feel the pain. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're close to your people, you're close to the process, but you get to someone that, never has the ability to impact the process or impact, and you ask them like, hey, what's keeping you up at night, or what is your biggest irritant with your job, they'll come up with a list of 50 that you as a leader could never have thought about.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty awesome. And I think in many organizations, including ours at Pod, is like, talking to the team and saying, hey guys, we are an AI native company. We should be leveraging AI across our whole processes, whether
Yeah.
it's engineering with code reviews and automatic product requirements document be generated, to marketing and content generation and our sales process and discovery prep, etc. So I think that I like the point about permission, because I think some people, I think in many organizations, it might still be a bit in the dark, not prohibited, but not as embraced as in many others. And when you're out there, you're saying, hey, this is a good thing. Let's be smart about how we use AI, but let's use it. I think can unlock a whole ton of opportunity within the organization that if it's just kept kind of at the top in the ivory tower of leadership, then at times it's not going to be as, either relevant or impactful as it could be when you get everyone to contribute creatively. So that's pretty awesome.
Right, and you made a very strong point. It should be across the organization. I know right now we're talking about go to market, but one of the things I've done in our company. First off, I'm on our AI governance committee. So not just for go to market, but across operations. Just because I'm using AI and also my team's using AI, I've brought ideas to them, educated, and that helped those leaders on their journey as well. For them and their staff, like for the actual operations role. And like I said, I just think it's important that everyone needs to be literate. It can't be just held with a few people, and otherwise you're harming the organization. And for those who say, oh no, we're not using AI, I can almost guarantee that someone in the company's using AI, whether they've talked about it or not. Like, let's be honest.
If a business leader in a Fortune 1000 company says that on a quarterly investor call, I am shorting that stock right away. I'm like, this is not going anywhere good. That's awesome. Maybe to shift a little bit the conversation towards how it has impacted more structurally your team, right? How have you seen, I guess, over the past 3-4 years, your team structure or the make of your team evolve as you and the rest of the organization have embraced a lot more of AI agents and GPTs? Like, has anything changed in the past few years?
So, what's crazy is like on the marketing side, like how much we output, because we have a podcast, we do 2 webinars, we have some virtual user groups, and I run an executive roundtable, case studies, blah 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 blah. We've been on a hiring freeze for the last 2 years, but our output has increased, right? Like and it's because we actually have 3 AI digital twins, whatever you want to call that, in marketing. Like we have 3 full-time jobs that are run by AI. And some people might say, oh, how does your marketing team feel about that? Well, the marketing team is running those. Like, so instead of having a human, they're running AI. And it's something that requires constant refining, iterating, and just monitoring it from a quality process, because we all know that there can be drift, bias, or hallucination, right? So I've empowered them that this is, okay, so you don't have a human that you are managing, you just happen to have AI you're managing. In sales, sales and customer success, we don't have AI twins, I'll say, yet. We're full sales cycle, so we don't use SDRs. But like I said, both CS and sales, once again, more productive. Our CS team, we used to kind of cap them at 30 accounts. They can handle 50 now.
That's awesome.
Right. And even our ABM, like we used to target 20 at a time, we can handle double that now, and still keep up. So, um, and it's still like we're seeing results, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're hitting quota, and we're doing it more efficiently. Okay, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is these leading indicators that you're mentioning around, being able to handle more accounts or
Mm,
market to more ABM, et cetera, are very powerful. At the end of the day, is what it comes down to is how much people do you need as an organization to reach
yeah,
certain targets. And you
yeah.
obviously hear about like crazy AI startups that are 15 employees
Mm,
and just hit $100 million in revenue type things, but that's a bit more of the exception to the rule. But I think in many cases, organization that have been around for a long time that are going through that transition are able to continue to grow with the same amount of people, or
yeah,
at least by not linearly uh, growing their organization. So that's like that. At the end of the day, that is the one thing: the revenue that you can generate by employee is, you can get that number through the roof by just being a lot more productive. That's the ultimate sign of productivity and throughput as a company is, hey, can I double my revenue without adding anyone? And I think that's super powerful. And it's kind of changes a bit, I think, from a personal development and professional development perspective. It's not necessarily, you don't go through, go up the ranks of your role, your job by just having people under you, but by perhaps taking on a bigger scope,
yeah,
right? Like, hey, you're not just going to manage anymore the webinars. You're going to manage the webinars, the focus groups, the newsletter, and ABM, with the help of one other employee and 20 agents. And I think
yeah.
that's super. I mean, that's exciting to me.
It's just a different skill set, right?
Yeah,
That people have to have, and obviously it depends how your customers buy, right?
yeah,
Like I said, we don't have SDRs. We've never had SDRs
yeah,
because of who a hospital CFO is not going to deal with an SDR, right? They
yeah,
wanted a trusted advisor,
yeah,
and in our buying cycle, there's up to 30 people. But that's just much more
cool.
manageable, and we can do more of those because of how we're leveraging AI. So I don't
Yeah,
need to hire more salespeople. Of course, will we at some point? Absolutely.
yeah, for sure,
Um,
for sure.
yeah.
There's some level of elasticity.
Yes.
Cool. I know we're coming up to the end of the conversation. Really, I love the insight. I love the pragmatism, and I think hopefully it encourages folks and leaders to understand that, hey, it's not about like transforming your business from this direction to this direction overnight, but rather taking baby steps so that your organization, your team can be a lot more comfortable with AI. Maybe a rapid fire set of questions before we let you go. I like to do those short answers.
Sure.
Has to come from the stomach. A couple of things related to tools and AI and sales altogether. Question number one: do you have a favorite sales methodology framework?
I No,
No,
there is none because there's no magic bullet.
I love
One
that.
size does not fit all. You have to flex and adapt to your customer. And I know that was not a short answer, but
I love it. That's great. The
I'm
answer is
pretty
no.
passionate about that.
Hey, it's the short answer we got. A no. I love that. Favorite productivity tool that you use in the day to day, other than ChatGPT?
Calendly. I just love having
Yeah,
my calendar organized.
yeah, I love that. One last question, maybe one sales popular belief, so to speak, that you personally don't agree with.
Outbound's dead.
Okay, that's a good one. Good one. I like that. And maybe one last one is, what is the last thing that you've learned? Could be about anything in your role, but something that you learned recently.
I was just, it's more of a reminder
Hmm.
to slow is fast. So I
Hmm.
always talk about sales as change management,
Yeah,
but it's also for people. Sometimes you have to slow down, so
yeah,
people can adapt. And I move fast, and sometimes with my team, and I was just reminded lately that yeah, I need to slow down a little bit. They need
yeah.
to catch up. Not everyone's on the train like I am.
One of my favorite quote, especially when building a startup, is you need to have urgency in the day to day, but patience and
Yeah.
grit, sorry, in the long term. And that to
Yeah.
me is like encapsulates everything about what it is to kind of grow a team or affect change or innovate.
Yeah.
Uh, Randi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. That was super exciting, super interesting. Really loved it. Maybe where can people find you? I know you're very active on LinkedIn and across communities, like you've mentioned. Any
Yeah.
particular areas if people want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is, on LinkedIn. And for your listeners, I don't have a date yet in October, but like on my bio it says, hit up my newsletter. It's not a newsletter, it's a sign up for a master class. I'm
Nice.
sharing my personal operating system, so if anyone wants to join, more than welcome.
Beautiful. That's awesome. We'll be on the lookout for it to see your personal SOP, which you're so fond of. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for tuning into this latest episode of the podcast. I'm Patrick, the founder and CEO of Pod. We'll see you on the next one.